want you to focus on this board because in a very few minutes, this complex board will be very simple for you. You're going to have a very simple understanding of something very complex. So the subject of salvation is very complex to many people. People try to avoid it, and it can look as complex as this particular board. So, but stay with me because in a very few minutes I'm going to explain this complicated subject to you, and you see how you fit in and how you can become one of the best understood person when it comes to the area of salvation, and how you can take advantage of this to step into the life of salvation. So I'm talking about understanding salvation. You can call it salvation for dummies, or you can call it salvation 101. Just very, very simple basic things. Okay, so stay with me. So I have this little word here, three-letter word, which we call God. And there is only one God, and this one God created one man. So this God is a spirit, and so the man he created was ruled by the spirit. So the spirit God created the spirit man. And that's what we see here. So the spirit man became the image of God and lived in the spirit in communication with God. So everything was fine. Everything was fine. Until something happened. The devil, who is also a creation of God. God created the devil, but the devil rebelled against God and sinned, rebellion against God. And so God cast him out, but the devil came in contact with man. When the devil came in contact with man in Eden, this devil caused man to disobey God. And that disobedience to God introduced sin. That's why I have this word here, sin. So the devil introduced sin to man. So man moved from being a spirit-filled man to a sinful man. Stay with me. When man became a sinful man, something happened to him. The life of this man moved away from being the life of God, but the life of a man that is ruled by flesh. Because sin produces life in the flesh. And when you read Romans 8:13, it says that the life in the flesh produces death. So the man plus sin will give you death. So when sin rules in the life of a man, the result is this word, death, which many people fear. When you mention death, people become afraid. But death in itself is not the problem, because death is consequence of an action. And that action is this little word here, sin. Okay, now, this man plus sin becomes a sinful man, but there is also a problem because now we've created sin plus death. Sin plus death becomes a new dimension that man has to deal with, because sin plus death becomes a law. Romans 8 verse 2 says, the law of the Spirit of life in Christ overcomes the law of the spirit of death, which is in sin. So sin plus death is a law. It's a law. And that law means that wherever sin comes into man, it must produce death. That is the law. Whenever sin is found in man, that must produce death. So, the sin itself produces death in man, but death in itself is not a problem, because death is righteousness. Death is righteousness. Why? Because death is the righteousness of God as a punishment for sin. For example, someone breaks into your house and he steals your belongings, takes your car, and then eventually you find the person. You go to court and the case is tried before the judge, and the judge says, oh, because you have reported to me and I have looked at the case and I'm convinced that this person, the accused, is guilty of the offense. So the judge hands over a prison sentence as a punishment to the accused. Now, that judgment, that punishment is righteousness. So that judgment is righteousness. So death in itself is righteousness. So when someone commits murder and is taken to court and the judge, the human judge, says, oh, I have looked at this case and I'm convinced that he committed the murder, the judgment for this sin you've committed is death by hanging or whatever. So when you sit in the court and you're listening to that, that particular human judge is demonstrating righteousness. So death in itself is the righteousness of God. And the combination of the death and sin becomes a law. Death in itself is righteousness, but that is not all. When you now add man plus sin plus death, what you now produce is a dead, sinful man. A dead, sinful man. What does this mean? It means that whenever a man is born, because this first man that God created, Adam, in the Garden of Eden, sinned, and when he sinned, the law of death in sin was created. And so, every other man that came out of Adam became a dead, sinful man. That is why the Bible says in Romans 3:23 that all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. I have sinned. You have sinned, because we are descendants of the first man, Adam. So this is where we are. So when a child is born today, that child is born a dead, sinful man. He is born a dead, sinful man. There is sin in him, because he is life in the flesh. Okay, so now you understand that. Simple. If the dead, sinful man remains in this state, he has two destinations. One is the destination of being cut off from God forever, separated from God. You see the way man moved away from where God wanted him to be and moved away to this point. So, if he remains here, he's cut off from God forever. Just simple as that. He's cut off from forever. So, there is no way for him to remain here without something happening to him for him to return back to God. He's moved far away from God. So what we need to do is, how do we get the dead, sinful man to return back to the man ruled by the Spirit? To the man ruled by. So for us to get this dead, sinful man, we have to remove the word dead. We have to remove the word sin. And so, for you to do that, it means that there has to be a process that would take this dead, sinful man, replace death with living, and replace sin with righteousness. And so, there has to be that process. So, this dead, sinful man has to undergo the process of righteousness in a living man for him to return back to the life of the Spirit of God. So, now, as we've seen in Romans 3:23, that no man is righteous. So, this man cannot produce righteousness anymore. He cannot produce righteousness anymore. There's no way. He's stuck at this point. There's no way. And all his children are DSM. This is what I call DSM. DSM means dead, sinful man. That is who we are. That's what we are. So we are stuck from here, separated from God. And the only way we can get back to this point is that we produce righteousness that can give us life. But we cannot, because of this law. This law is sealed. Until you deal with this law of sin and death, the law of the life of sin and death, you cannot return back. However, the only one that is righteous is God. So only God is righteous. Only God is righteous. It is only in God that we can find righteousness. So, God has to share his righteousness with the dead, sinful man. God has to find a way to transfer his righteousness to the man, because he can't help himself. Okay? Stay with me. But problem is, how can God transfer his righteousness to man? How can God transfer his righteousness to man? For us to do that, we come back to this law. Because this law is God's law. And God's law is sealed. It means that for God to transfer his righteousness to man, he has to pay the penalty of sin, which is death. He has to pay the penalty of sin, which is death. And the penalty of sin, which is death, is God's word that cannot be broken. And so, what it means is that God has to die. God has to die. Because death, the law of sin and death is his law. God's law cannot be broken. And so, for God to give man his righteousness, for God to give you his righteousness, he has to pay for your debt. And to pay for your debt means that God has to die. He has to come to the point of dying in the flesh. In the flesh. Because sin produces death in the flesh, not in the spirit, in the flesh. God is a spirit. If God remains in the spirit, he cannot produce he cannot pay the punishment of death in the spirit. Because sin can only produce death in the flesh. So, for God to pay for the sin of man, which is death, he has to leave the realm of the spirit and come into the realm of the flesh. Okay? He has to come to the realm of the flesh. We will come to that later. Now, let's come to this box. God has to die in the form of man, in the flesh, for him to pay the punishment of death. I want you to understand that this is where many people today get confused. They say, if Christ is God, why did he have to die? Why did God die? God had to die because there is no other way. There is no other solution to bring the dead sinful man, all these dead sinful men, back to life. There was no other way. Because man cannot produce righteousness. God cannot pay for the debt, the penalty of man's sin in the spirit. He has to become man and to die in the flesh for him to pay it, because this debt must be paid in the currency of the flesh. The currency for paying this is flesh. You have to become flesh for you to pay this particular penalty. Because when man commits sin, he becomes flesh, and in that flesh, he produces death. So for you to pay for this debt, you must become flesh. And for you to pay for this debt, you must have righteousness. And for you to have righteousness, you must be in the position of God. So God had to die, because there was no way out. There was no way out. The second reason why God had to die is because of his love. Because of his love for this TSM. That is why God's love is the greatest gift that we have received. The greatest gift. His love for us, His love for you. And that's why John 2:16 says, for God so much loved the world, so much loved you, that He gave Himself in the flesh to die. And so, this God's love for man is so great. So, that is why you see, sometimes life pushes some people to the bottom of it. You hit the ground so hard that everything just doesn't make sense. There is crime, there is iniquity, there is all manner of things around you. It's as if your life is thinking. But in that situation, God so much loves you that He has made a decision that while you're still in this condition, He wants to die for you. He has to die for you. That is the second. And the third reason is it is God's law. It's the third reason. It is God's law. God's law is this law, and He has to fulfill it. God's word and His law is one. It cannot be broken. Okay? It cannot be broken. Okay. Now, you see how this happens. There is no other way. It is God's love and it is God's law. But there is a big problem still remaining. There is another problem still remaining, which we are going to talk about in the next episode of this understanding salvation. So, in the next session of this series, we will be looking at what God has to do to be able to die without ceasing to be God. Because though God has chosen to die, He still remains God, and that is the problem. That is the problem. So in the next teaching, we will be looking at how God solved this problem. So I want you to just stay with me and continue to follow this series, Understanding Salvation, and the Spirit of God would help you to really begin to make a decision that at the end of this series, your life would be transformed, because there is a journey here which you are going to stay with me with. Your life would be transformed, and you will begin to take great advantage of what God did in deciding to pay the penalty of death, which I and you could and would have never been able to pay. So I want you to share this video. I want you to like it and share it and send it across to as many people as you can, and also subscribe to this channel. This is Salvation, Understanding Salvation, and that is the series I'm taking at this period. May the Lord bless you, and join me next time. It is well with you.